Bill. Great. Good stuff. Wait. Really?
How long time? All right, everybody, let's grab a seat. All right, glad everybody's here. We're on week 6. So seems like every week I get critiques from people online. And I had a complaint this week about the Wizard of Oz thing.
What you saying?
Well, the complaint was, I wrote down what they said, that because he said I repeatedly said that you've always had the power, my dear. You just didn't know, right? That's a line from the movie. Okay. And he was a little adamant that, aren't we powerless? And I'm like, I'm trying to use analogies that make sense, that help carry the narrative. It doesn't mean, but yeah, thank you. But the truth is, we've always had the power. We've always had the power to find God. We've always had the power to change our lives, right? We always had the power to go inside and get well. And we've always had the power to go home. If we don't know where home is. Hey guys, we're having a meeting over here. All right.
Yeah.
And then somebody asked me also if I can explain a little bit better the process of recovery, the first 7 steps. And I don't want to keep beating up on subjects, but the first 7 steps is really basically me looking at me. And then when we get to 8 now, we're going outside of ourselves to practice recovery. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so just in case you're watching now, everybody agreed it makes sense, so I don't have to go over this too much more. Okay. And one of the other things that we did in week 1, but we haven't mentioned it since, is the set-aside prayer. So if you remember the set-aside prayer, that's a good prayer to use each week or whenever you pick up the book and you start studying the book. And then one more thing I want to go over. So I was talking about the process and what we do here. And when we follow the directions that are in the book, some people, and I think I said that, I'm not trying to take away from anybody's sobriety. There's people that I know that have decades of sobriety that I respect. And I love them, and they're sober and they're good members of Alcoholics Anonymous. But some of them, it's taking them 7, 10, 15 years to find God and to, and that's not uncommon in the rooms. But our process is a way for a new person to do that much quicker. So if you follow the directions as we're going over them, then it doesn't mean that they're wrong and they did it wrong. They're sober. They're good members of the fellowship. But there is a process that if you follow this process, you'll get to those things quicker than 7 or 10 years, because that's what the promises are. I don't usually refer to them as promises. I call them results. The promises, I refer to them as results. If you do this, the result is, but a promise is, there's promises for every step. Step 1 is you don't use, you don't drink. Step 2, you've made a relationship with God, and each step has a promise. Okay. But just like any other promise that you've ever had in your life, there's some things that require you to do. I don't know if, like, when I was a little kid, my mom would promise me that if I took out the garbage and kept my room clean, she'd give me a couple bucks to go to the movie at the end of the week. I'm old, this was only a couple of bucks. Ricky's going a couple of bucks. But, that was a promise, but it had a requirement. I had to do some things. And all of our promises have requirements that you have to meet these requirements in order to get the promise. There's one tool I want to share with you. You might want to write this in your book, because this is a tool that works for the newcomer or for somebody with 40 years of sobriety or anybody in between. This always works. If you do these three things, 999.9% of the time, you're gonna make the right decision. And it's talk about it, write about it, pray about it. Talk about it, write about it, pray about it. So if you have an idea and you're thinking about doing something, talk to your sponsor, talk to some sober people in the room about it. If you take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle, and on one side write all the good things that can happen if you do that, and on the other side all the bad things that can happen. That's writing about it. And then get on your knees and ask God, talk to God about it. If you talk about it, write about it, pray about it, you're going to make the right decision. I don't care what the topic is or what the situation is or how long you've been sober. That is a tool that has never failed me. Talk about it, write about it, pray about it. It's a good tool to have. Right? Because we come in here, we have to learn it. We have to learn how to do it, and then we have to learn how to do it in all our affairs. All right. Anybody got any questions on any of that stuff? Anything you want to go over before we go back into the book? All right. I think we left off on page 26, if I'm not mistaken. And that first paragraph, I don't think we talked about this last week, but it's a certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. And so right here, we're talking about Roland, was his name, okay? And Roland happens to be one of the two guys that showed up in court for Ebby Thatcher. But Roland is the one, he went over to Dr. Young, and I think he spent the whole summer there working with Dr. Young, and he got sober. And he was from a well-to-do family, and coming back to the States in those days, they used to take this big ship back from Europe to America. And so he went to Paris, and he was going to get on board the ship, and they had a party for him because, he knew a lot of people there. They had a party for him, and he got drunk. And that's when over here, he says, though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for it. So he went back to the doctor and he asked the doctor, like, what the hell? I think we did that last week. We talked about that. Okay. So let's go on to, yeah, we did, because on top of page 27, we talked about the certain simple attitude, and we already went over that, right? Certain simple attitude is recovery first. Oh, we actually did this whole page, right? And we went change. Okay. So let's go to page 28. The bottom of page 28, it says, in the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. So, bottom of page 28, they're telling you that the chapter coming up more about alcoholism is an explanation of alcoholism. And then on 29, he talks about Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we have recovered. These are followed by 43 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. So this paragraph, what it's telling you is that, because we've talked about it in here already, we hear a lot about the first 164 pages. But our book doesn't tell us to read the 164 pages. It tells us to read the book through. Okay? And the back of after page 164, all the stories in the back, they're all about step 2. All the personal stories are step 2. All right? Because that's what it says here. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. So that's step 2. And then he's hoping that you can agree you're one of us and you have to have this thing that we have. All right. So let's go over to page 30 and more about alcoholism. So over and over again in this chapter is examples of the insanity of alcoholism. And once again, while you're studying this, you want to try to fit your own experience to each one of these things. But these are all examples of the insanity of alcoholism. And he says, most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. Now, just stop there for a second. If you have 12 and 12 with you, and you go to your 12 and 12, and you go to step 1 in the 12 and 12, look at the first thing it says in your 12 and 12 on step 1. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course, right? Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. And look what he's saying here, the first sentence and more about alcohol. Most of us had been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. So there's a message here, people. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. And over here he's saying, who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one. Well, if practically no one cares to admit complete defeat, then guess what? Practically no one does. Yet we think it's strange when a newcomer comes in and they don't want to admit that they're alcoholic. Look at him, he don't want to admit he's alcoholic. No shit, neither did you when you got here. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one. So they need help. They need help in understanding what they really are and where they've come out in life. And that's what the literature that we're going through helps them do, if you help them, guide them through that. So no person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. And there again, if you're keeping count, bodily and mentally. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. Now, he uses some harsh words here. The great obsession, he says. And then he says, the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity and death. So, an obsession is a thought that excludes all other thoughts. Especially in example with us when it comes to alcohol or drugs or whatever you're working the steps on. So an obsession is a thought that excludes all other thoughts. And then he says the illusion. What is an illusion? Right? So an obsession is a trick of the mind. Right? It's lying to yourself. Right? You're being tricked. Your mind is being tricked. And an illusion, guess what? It's the same thing. It's a trick of the mind. An obsession is, I believe something that isn't so. An illusion is, I think something that isn't so. I see something that isn't so. I believe something that isn't so. They're both tricks of the mind. So we have this disease that is lying to us and trying to kill us. And then he says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. And this next sentence says, this is the first step in recovery. We went through this already, right? I asked for, I think the first week I asked you guys that. What is the first step in recovery? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable is not the first step in recovery. This is the first step in recovery. We're going to finish this chapter out, and then we're going to go back to this paragraph and in deep explanation, find out actually how to work a first step by following these directions right here. We're not going to do that tonight, but we will. And I promised you before that when we do, you will understand the truth about yourself. And once you understand the truth about yourself, you'll never be able to drink or use on that truth again. The only way you can drink or use after that is to be blocked off from the truth and by some insane line. Getting caught in the illusion. Now look what he says, another harsh word. The delusion that we're like other people or presently maybe has to be smacked. The delusion. It's another trick of the mind. The illusion is where I see something that isn't so. The illusion is I believe something that isn't so. Right? And so when you got an obsession and then we're stuck with illusions and delusions, we're not reality based. I think last week I said we're twisted. Some people didn't like that, but we're twisted. And I exaggerated a little bit last week. I said to you that my first thought is never a sane thought. That's not true. That's not true. Today, my thoughts are much better than they were 10, 20 years ago. But it's still, I'm still twisted. I don't try to kid myself and think, oh, you've been sober all these years, you're okay. No. No, we're not talking cured here. So, but I don't play mind games with myself today, you know, and I realize that I can't trust my mind without question. It's always good to question myself. Okay. And it's not about a drink or a drug, but it's about all the other shit, right? You know, this is the not drinking, people, is the lowest form of sobriety. It's just the tip of the iceberg. This is not about not drinking. This is about getting rid of the things that block us from a higher power and having a relationship with this higher power and growing spiritually to where you get to the point where your thoughts and actions are, not even about drinking or using, but your thoughts and actions are not about sabotaging yourself. How many times sober, the people sitting in here right now tonight, how many times have you sabotaged yourself so completely sober? Mm-hmm. Right? That's what we're talking about. That's what recovery is about. Learning to not sabotage yourself anymore.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
So then could I work the steps over my character defects then? I guess
you can,
they
but you should pick a specific character defect.
Okay.
And work on that. But absolutely. Okay. Yeah. You can absolutely work the steps on just about anything. That's what we're supposed to do. If you're 5 years sober, I think I shared with you the first week, a guy recently with 12 years sober was all excited. He came up to me and said, Dan, I'm starting the steps all over again. I said, oh, cool. What are you working the steps on? Alcohol and drugs. I said, why? Why would you do that? You're 12 years sober. Why would you work the steps on alcohol and drugs? I bet you there's a whole bag of shit that you got that can use some help. And he looked at me and I went, listen, I only say that because I know I came with a whole bag myself. We all have a bag of shit that we're gonna reach in there, grab something and apply the 12 steps to it. That's what the 12 steps says. 12 steps telling you to do that. So. Okay. So we're back on page 30 and he says, we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. Okay, so there's no playing with words here. We've lost the ability to control our drinking. So if you get here and you're new, you don't have the ability to control your drinking. And whatever you're working the steps on, you've probably lost the ability to control that too. So all of this works the same way as it does for alcohol and drugs. It's just the only difference is most of these things are not twofold diseases. Whatever you're going to work the steps on is onefold. But when it comes to the alcohol and drugs, it's twofold. Okay.
How so? Let's say mine's gambling. I'm working gambling. I'm not, but let's say I'm working gambling. How is that not?
How is that what?
I'll give you 2 to 1 odds. You can't answer this now. How is that not a twofold?
Well, it's all of the mind.
Yeah, but when I gamble, my dopamine kicks in and I get that rush
Right.
that I only get with that. I don't get it with pornography or
Right.
cheating on my taxes,
Okay.
but I get it with that.
Okay. Did everybody hear what he said? Everybody heard what he said? Okay. Now, if you remember, I think I went over this in week 1 or week 2. I said to you, when I ask you, why are you powerless over alcohol? And you tell me what you do after you drink. I can't control it. It controls me. I lose control. You've missed the point. Same thing applies to gambling or anything else. When I ask you why you're powerless over that, and you tell me what happens when you're gambling, you've missed the point. If you're powerless and you want to work the steps on gambling, then the fact that you're gambling is you've already missed the point. If you're powerless over alcohol and the fact that you're drinking, you've already missed the point. Does that make sense to you guys? I want you to understand that. Does it make sense to you? Okay. Let's use it with alcohol, and then you can apply the same thing to gambling or anything else. I ask you, why are you powerless over alcohol or cocaine or whatever your drug of no choice is, right? Why are you powerless over alcohol? And you tell me that I can't control it. It controls me. I lose control over it. You've missed the point, because you're telling me what happens after you use. And the powerless, we all could admit that once we take a drink or a drug, everybody could attest to the fact that we don't know when we're going to stop. All bets are off then. But why do I take a drink when I swear I'm not going to do it again? When I look at myself in the mirror and I go, what's the matter with you? I swear I'll never do this again. And then I'm doing it again. That's powerless. When you do what you swear you're not going to do, when you do what you don't want to do with every fiber of your being, damn it, that's powerless. And when you do that and you tell me what happens to you after you do that, you've missed the point. Now, does that make any sense?
What's
Okay.
the point?
The point is I'm powerless, right? So I need to stop myself before I do it. And the reason that I do it is because I have a disease of mind along with body, mental and physical, but it's the mind that makes me do it. And the same thing applies to gambling. It's the mind that makes me do it. Once I gamble, I get a rush, but and you
It's
can
like
call
the
it your
high.
dopamines are making you feel high, but it's all the mind. It's just more powerful. So there's no physical aspect where with alcohol and drugs, once you put in your body, then your body takes over and your body makes you do more. Okay, that's not true for gambling, though it may seem that way because of the high you get from gambling. It's all of the mind.
A lot of times I hear, I drank because that was the solution to my problem.
Sure.
You hear that a lot of times.
Yeah, and that's probably true. Because if you're not in recovery, and you don't have a spiritual answer, getting loaded is a good solution to the shit that's going on in your life. Now, I'm not saying it's a good solution that you should practice if you want sobriety, but if you want to escape from reality, it's a good solution. A drink or a drug is a good solution to escape from reality.
So in other words, like if you were to just like throw your hands up, that's being powerless. Saying, you know, like saying you're, that's it. That's what the control is that's where you're powerless. Throw your hands up and you don't want to have control over any of it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What's your name?
April,
April. What was your drug of no choice? Alcohol and meth. Okay. Good combination, yeah.
Healthy.
Yeah. Okay. So can you briefly, within like 30 seconds or so, just tell us what your positive happens every time you do alcohol and meth? Just, right to the point. No, not positive. That you're positive that's going to happen if you drink it. No. I'm not talking about you bringing any positive thing to I'm saying you're 100% sure that this is going to happen if you drink and use. Okay. Let me help you out. Do you wind up staying up for 3 days? Do you wind up staying up for 2 or 3 days? Yeah. You sure about that? Yeah. Okay. So it's fair to say you're positive that you're going to stay up for 2 or 3 days. Not that staying up for 2 or 3 days is a positive thing. All right. Okay. So you're positive that you're going to stay up for 2 or 3 days. Do you mess up your body with nutritions and unhealthiness? All of that. You're positive, right? Okay. Not again. That's a positive thing, but you're sure that's going to happen, right? Okay. How long are you sober now? Okay. Very good. Now, sitting here today at 9 months sober, or almost 9 months sober, are you sure that you don't want those things to happen to you? Yeah, you don't want those consequences to happen to you. You're sure about that, right? You're positive about that, right? Okay. So if next week, God forbid, you're doing that again, right? It sure wasn't your choice. You shouldn't decide to go use, right? No, you first of all, you don't choose to. That's a lie. That's not you not understanding your disease and what's happening to you by saying you chosen to do. You're not understanding this program at all when you think that you chose to do that. We just established the fact that it's a horrible thing for you to be up for 2 or 3 days and not sleep and ruin your body with all this stuff, right? It's a horrible thing. You don't want that, right? You're positive you don't want that, right? Okay, so then you, in any sane thought that you may have, you don't choose to do that. The disease chooses for you when you don't do what you're supposed to do. Okay. Now, after you take a drink or some meth, without a doubt, you're powerless after that. But before you do, you already know you don't want to do it. You're already swearing you don't want to do it. You're already praying you never do it again. And that's the powerless you need to get in touch with before you drink, before you use, before you gamble, before you do whatever you're working the steps on. Does that make sense to you guys? Well, I don't know if to say you're powerless over your thoughts is correct on it. What's more correct is to say you don't follow through. You don't play the tape through and you don't take the precautions you need to. To deny the thought is not going to help you. I think we mentioned this last week. I'll get you in a second, Nicole. I think we mentioned this last week that if I try not to think about drinking, I drink. I think more about drinking, right? So it's not, the answer is not to deny the thought. The answer is to get help.
That is the reality. Because of the twistedness in our minds, in my mind, that thought happens way before.
Yeah. The thought happens way before, but you don't have to follow through and take the drink. There's things you can do from that thought to before the drink that you can save yourself from taking a drink. That's what I'm talking about. That's what the powerless is that we need to get in touch with. Not when I ask you why you're powerless and you tell me you can't control it. That means you've already used. I can't, it controls me. That means you've already used. When I ask you why you're powerless, you need to tell me why you can't stop yourself from doing it. And then utilize this program to do it. Nicole?
Okay, whatever you got. But what happens to me when I think about right now, sober for a while, and I think about drinking and using, I recoil from that, my mind.
As from a hot
No, no,
flame.
Absolutely not, I don't ever want to go back.
Right.
However, when I've been not, years ago when I first got sober, my thought process about that was, God, I hope I don't have to go back to that. But what happens in those minutes before I'm about to drink or use, I have no recollection of those things that I don't ever want to go back to.
Right.
There's no recall.
Yeah,
of-
and the book, we read that in the book last week where it says you can't recall the pain and the suffering and humiliation of even a week ago.
Me.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some confusion on that we're not understanding.
Well, there's two levels of powerlessness. One is after you've used and one is before you used, right? So, and the book, we've already read that where the book defines the two. It says, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body, right? And I asked you, which one can you do something about? And you said, we come to the conclusion that you could do something about the physical. You could not put it in your body. You have that power. You've always had that power, my dear. You just didn't know it. You could not put it in your body. I'll get you in a minute, Dave. But so you have that power to do that. Now, you may need help. You may need to call your sponsor. You may need to get to a meeting. You may need to hit your knees. You may need to talk about it, write about it, pray about it. But if you do those things, you will make the right decision and not take that drink. Therefore, that seemingly hopeless state of mind is just that. It only seems that way. It's not real. David? Go ahead.
Andrew says,
Go ahead, Nicole. What?
That power has to come from a God of our understanding.
Yes.
So the only thing that keeps us from picking up that first drink is a power greater than ourselves.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. If you incorporate that power, God, right? If you get on your knees and pray, and then you call your sponsor, and your sponsor says, all right, let's go. I'm meeting you. Pick you up. We're going to meet. Or come by now. Come by the house. We'll have some coffee. Or let's get together. Or you walk out and you walk into a meeting. See, so there's other things that the Creator has put in place. And the important thing, yes, and at the end of the day, it's yes, the God has, but it doesn't work itself out like you pray and boom, God stopped you from doing that. Other things have happened that set this ball up to make it real. So the end result is not just God saying, boom, okay, you're not going to use today. David?
no, Andrew said willpower alone won't get you sober.
No, willpower alone won't keep you sober.
I think that's where we talk about, if I go out and drink, I chose to, because I can either hit my knees, call my sponsor, go to a meeting, or I can choose to ignore all that and be stupid.
No. See, again, that's the disease messing with you. That's the disease telling you that I know what I could do. I don't want to do that. I want to take a drink. No, you don't. When we establish what happens to you and the people around you that you love and care for every time you do, but you swear you're never going to do again, you can't convince me in any means, any way that you chose to do that. What happens is the disease is powerful. I'm powerless. And when the disease comes into play, it makes me think that I can do this, or I just want to do this, or I deserve to do this, or whatever. It lies to us. And the lie is, I just chose to do it. That's a lie. That's not real. That's not true. It's a lie. You don't choose to do what we do when we do what we do. Don't ask me to repeat that. I just said. I have no idea what I said. It sounded right as I was saying it though. It's being recorded. But, so, and I don't mind talking about this for a whole hour because it's that important.
It feels like a safe space, so I don't think we're just currently. But I mean, it seemed like a lot of this, we're talking about activities or substances that cause artificial dopamine drops, right? That's what makes us feel those feels, right? So my question is where I feel like I'm in a safe space. You are, well, why is nicotine okay then?
Okay, that's a good question. He's asking, why is nicotine okay? Well, first of all, I don't know anybody that said nicotine is okay, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, we talk about mind-altering substances. Well, we have a single list of purpose in AA, it's alcohol. But in Cocaine Anonymous, by the way, in case you're not familiar with them, there's no room for play there because their first step says all mind-altering substances. Okay, so some people in AA for years, on the marijuana maintenance program. I don't drink, and so AA singleness of purpose can be a little tricky for people like us that are tricky people. But in Cocaine Anonymous, there is no out for you. It's all of the mind-altering substances. Now, I said that, I want to say this. Nicotine is not a mind-altering substance. It is a mood-altering substance. Okay? So, now, I think I was around 20 years sober before I quit smoking cigarettes. It was harder to quit than anything for me.
Yeah.
But I wound up, I vape now. But my point is, nicotine is not. It is addictive, but it is not a mind-altering substance. So we don't in Cocaine Anonymous, where there's no loophole, where it's all mind-altering substances. It's only mind-altering substances. All alcohol, all barbiturates, all amphetamines, all heroin and cocaine and meth and all of that stuff. All of that is included. But caffeine and nicotine are mood-altering substances, both of those. And they do not fall under the... Now, if you have a problem with them and you're sober, work the steps on them. Absolutely. Because, there's most of the people are working steps on things that are not mind-altering substances, gambling and all this other stuff, right? But they're problems, they're issues. You work the steps on them. Okay. These are good, healthy questions, people. Nobody attacks you. I like that.
Freedom and choice. Like at the end of the day, as a mature adult in recovery, your freedom to choose to do right or do wrong with a higher power and a conscious contact. Where's the powerlessness? I mean, I am powerless every morning, every single day, but where does the freedom of choice come in?
Well, okay. I'm going to be 34 years sober this year. Okay. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do is to establish the fact that of and by myself, I'm powerless. I'm not talking about alcohol and drugs. I'm talking about some sick behavior. Okay. So, what I have to do, the second part of the first step is, my life is unmanageable, is I have to bring God into it to help manage my life. So there's a routine that we do that the steps call for that bring in, that overcome the powerlessness and overcome that. Of and by myself, my life is unmanageable. And you ain't gonna manage it for me. He ain't gonna, they ain't gonna, God, I need God. So I need to get in touch with God, bring him into my life and go, it's kind of like putting my armor on and I can go out there amongst the troops and do battle in the nicest way that I can, but I'm safe and protected because I have God in my life. So that beats the powerlessness. But without that, I can show you powerless all day long on all different kinds of things. Yeah. So, okay.
I have to. I'm powerless over thought. Because I can't control whether or not I have a thought of doing something out of character or wanting to drink or use. So the powerlessness actually comes from the disease giving me that first thought.
Yes. Okay. I'll buy that. I'll go with that because here's the thing. I'm not responsible for what I think. I'm not responsible for what I cannot control what comes into this mind. And neither can you.
No.
So I'm not responsible for what comes into this mind. I am responsible to my response to it or my reaction to it, but I cannot not think about sick shit. I just can't help it.
Hell yeah.
Listen, I tell people all the time, if you knew what went through my head, you wouldn't sit next to me. You can't help it. Again, like last week, we're twisted.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's try to keep it down. So, anybody else had something?
Okay, so if he wanted
Yeah, if you hit him over the head with something, he might.
Hey, don't give her any idea.
No. The power that we have is limited to about the radius of about this far from where we are. It's me. Okay. I have no power when it comes to other things and other people. Okay. And today, the miracle in my life and the peace in my life is I don't want that power over you. I don't look for it. I don't search for it. I don't try to get it. You be you. If you being you disturbs me, I don't stay near you. It's that simple. I'm not trying to fix you or cure you. I just limit my time with you.
Yes.
Joe.
I can't say exactly on what page, maybe we'll get to this later. But the book does tell us that having recovered that we have been restored power.
Yes.
But
Well, we have been restored power. We absolutely have been. And that's kind of like going back to David's head on the new body, right? You remember that? Okay, so he's been restored to power physically, but not mentally. Okay, so yes, we have been restored. The power has been restored to us. Yes, we have, and we can act sanely and normally, right? We can do it. Thank you. I meant to have, but that's good. Thank you. So yes, the power has been restored to us, but it doesn't mean we can't screw that up. Because what we did today will not keep us sober next week. I shared with you last week or the week before, I shared with you the most powerful spiritual experience I had. And I told you that I probably could have went 6 months without going to meetings or doing anything. It was that powerful. But no experience is powerful enough to keep us sober. That's why the book says we go through the process of recovery, the first 7 steps, and then we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences. We need to keep getting them, right? So yes, Joe, we've been restored, but that's not a forever going forward deal. You have to renew it every 24 hours. It's a 24-hour program. All right. let's go back to page 30. So now we're on the third paragraph. He says, we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drink, and we know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were gaining control, but such intervals usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. To me, those are the best 3 words for the first step you're going to see in this book. If you cannot, I always ask a newcomer, do you agree with that? Do you relate to that? If they say no, I gotta sit down. We got a lot to talk about. Because pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization is a powerful, powerful saying, right? But look what he says next. We're convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. This is what I call the pickle theory. Okay? And the pickle theory is simple. Once you take a cucumber and you ferment it, it becomes a pickle. You can never, ever again take that pickle and make it a cucumber. You understand? So let's make no mistake about it. You're a pickle, you're a pickle, you're a pickle, I'm a pickle, he's a pickle, she's a pickle. We're all pickles. Now, we've got sour pickles, we've got hot pickles, we've got all kinds of pickles. But once you take a cucumber, you ferment it, it's got a pickle, it's always going to be, you're never going to make that pickle a cucumber again. Once you become alcoholic, you're never going to be a non-alcoholic again. Now, one other thing, very important. I shared with you the first week or two that there's going to be a time or two in this book where AA stamps their approval and their thing on a piece of information that medically was proven in 1976. Remember I said that to you?
Yeah.
This is one spot right there. I want to read it for you again. We're convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in a grip of a progressive illness. AA in 1939, when this book was published and came out, AA said that we have a progressive illness. That was not medically proven until 1976. How do you like that? Show me a book that powerful. Anybody got a book that can make a prediction and 40 years later come true? 40 years later, it's proven. And I'll tell you what happened. Can't remember the lady's name. There was a doctor in Houston, Texas, a lady doctor, and she was working in the morgue, and she was getting an influx of these hobos, and she was doing autopsies on them. And she found out something very strange. They were all loaded with morphine, synthetic morphine. And when she went to the brain and dissected the brain, she noticed there was a growth attached to the brain, different sizes, but they all had this growth. And this is what happened. This is the chronic alcoholic brain. There's a technical word for it today. I don't know what it's called. But what she found was that because she was wondering, these people are living under the bridges. How do they get all this money for all this morphine? Where are they getting this money? They weren't using morphine. They were drinking alcohol. And when they drank alcohol, instead of dispersing through your body like it should, it was going to this brain and it was turning into a synthetic morphine. And that, my friends, is the proof of a progressive illness that AA said in 1939 that we have. So, and it's a little deeper. I'll go into a little more when we hit the next point of that. So he says, we're like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. Right? No more being a cucumber. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there have been brief recovery followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. You know, before we go on with this, you know, one of the things is getting involved. We were talking about, you know, how to stop this powerlessness stuff. Getting involved in your own recovery, right? Not just getting a sponsor and you know, chase recovery the way you chase that shit out there. You know, because we run and gun out there. We do the craziest things to drink and get dope and do all that stuff. When we come in here and our sponsor says, read this, we'll talk about, oh, okay. I always share the word that I learned in treatment when I got sober was try. But then you gonna do this deal? Yeah. Try. Well, don't try it. The guy told me my first couple of weeks, don't try to get sober, Danny. Get sober.
Yeah.
Do this deal. Did you ever try to drink? No. I drank.
Yeah.
Nobody else said, you want to drink? Try. So the fact, you know, get committed, you know, be committed to this program. What's committed? I mean, seriously committed. You want to know what committed is? Look at a breakfast plate. Bacon, eggs, right? The chicken wasn't really committed. He participated. The friggin' pig was committed. The pig was committed to that dish there. But the chicken just participated. Don't participate in this deal. Be committed to this deal. Give this everything you got. If you chase this the way you chase that shit out there, you got a good chance of growing spiritually and changing your life. You know, instead of coming in here and getting ready to start to commence to begin, you know, get real and do this deal. All right, page 31. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation. Self-deception, by the way, people, is I chose to do it. Somebody says, I just chose to do it. That is self-deception. It's a lie. Every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore, non-alcoholic. If anyone is showing the inability to control his drinking, can go do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. I don't know about you, but I don't want to drink like other people anyway.
No.
They were wishes. And then he talks, you know, Bill gets his little sense of humor here. He talks about changing the brands and the environment and making, you know, swearing with or without an oath. You know, he's getting funny. And the bottom of the page, he said, we do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. So here's a test. Hey, he's got a test for you. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. If you're a cocaine addict, go to the crack house and just spend $50. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try more than once. Now that's important that Bill says try more than once. We've already discussed this, because if your disease is not that far progressed, it may be possible for you to drink and not set the allergy off. But if you're reach a certain point of your alcoholism, it's not going to happen. You're going to set the allergy off. But so Bill said try it more than once, because he knows even if you don't set the allergy off, you will the next time you try this, right? I don't want to get in. Let's leave off here, but we've got 5 minutes. So let's do questions and answers for 5 minutes. Who's got a question about something you want to ask? Everybody had a ton of questions before now. It's question time, nobody got a question. Yes,
We wore our-
hey, guys, he's asking an important question. Okay. What do you think the answer to that is? I know, that's why I asked you that. Well, the man's asking a question and you should be paying attention. So it's not that your will doesn't exist. It's more safe to say it's misplaced. And it's misplaced because of all the practices you've had all these years of misplacing it. So when you come in here and you learn a new set of ways to live, is what the steps teach you to do, and this program teaches you to do, then you don't misplace it. And then you do have, well, and Joe was talking about that, you've been restored to sanity. Let's go to the second set of promises on page 84. 10-step promises, the bottom of the page. I like to take a newcomer and I like to read this to them, or have them read it to me. The bottom page, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react, so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. So that's a great promise to somebody that's dying from alcoholism and crawls into these rooms. Now, you can't have that tomorrow, but you can have it. It's there for you like it's there for anybody else. And you're sane thinking your will come back to you. But when it does, you have to continue to do what we do here. I think last week or the week before, I says we never stop working steps. If you stop working steps, you stop your spiritual growth. You could go to 10 meetings a week. You could sponsor 8 people. You could talk to your sponsor. But if you're not actively putting steps alive in your life, you are shortchanging yourself. And you're not getting out of this deal what you can. I don't care how long you've been sober. At least once a year, go through all 12 steps on a particular thing. Anybody else got a question? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Go ahead, Nicole.
Fact is that most alcohol, for reasons we get into your doesn't drink. So it goes on to bring into at certain times, we are unable to at certain times to bring into our consciousness the sufficient force and memory of the sufferings and humiliation of even we were a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink.
Yes.
So to me, that is powerlessness.
Yes, it is.
So even if I'm sober.
No, not even if you're sober, because what we just read on page 86, or what was it, page 84, what we just read on 84 obliterates that, knocks that right out of the park. That's on page 24. Yes, that's where somebody is at that stage of their recovery. Not on page 84. Right, so you can't keep looking at that if you're sober a long time and applying that to yourself, no. You shouldn't be there. If you are there, you need to go back and start the steps and stuff. No, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying.
That haven't finished working the steps, that they may not be at that point where we're talking about in the promises. So when we're talking about tolerance, I think it's important that, for me, it is.
Yes. But nobody, I didn't stand here tonight at all and say, and insinuate that that's where a new person is at. What I just said to this gentleman was, let me read, I like to read this to a newcomer because it's where they can be. It's a good promise for them that it's where they're gonna be at. If they stick around and do this deal, this is what they can expect. That's what I said. I didn't say a newcomer's gonna be there. Absolutely not. No. Yeah. All right, guys, next week. Thank you. Please, sorry. Thank you.